Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Peninsula VFL Update, and how lucky we are to have VFL footy back in Victoria after the mostly recent lockdown period. I'm here with Michael O'Neill as always, and we'll look ahead to this week's round of VFL action.
Seems like every time we record this, Jonty, it's on the back of a lockdown for a couple of weeks, but hopefully this is the last one of the year and we get a smooth flow through to the finals.
Hopefully we are able to get some continuity in terms of footy, get some rounds played in a row, and that kicks off for Frankston this week against Richmond. But before we touch on that game, it's probably worth thinking about casting our minds back about a month when Frankston played Port Melbourne and got over them pretty easily. It was a 15-16 goal drubbing against North Melbourne, a really strong performance from Frankston under the Friday night lights, and we've become accustomed to that sort of performance from Frankston at home this season.
It was probably their most complete performance. I think during the broadcast we mentioned whether the Dolphins would have the killer instinct to finish the game off with a four-quarter effort, and not only did they get a big win in the end, it was a nice percentage boost, and I think it got Frankston up to 6th on the ladder after that game. Now down to 7th after there was a few games played in the VFL up in Queensland last week, Jonty.
Yeah, so really strong performance from Frankston. Obviously, you talk about some matches being played up in Queensland last week. Those games, just to run through them, Aspley went down to Gold Coast 44-122. You watched that game. Joel Jeffrey dominated.
Amazing. He cramped up at the end of the game. He'd been going that well, kicked 9 goals from about 11 kicks. He's been rewarded with senior selection this week, but that was a comprehensive win.
Southport got up in the thriller against Essendon. That had some publicity with Alex Rance making a foray back to sort of semi-elite level footy.
Yeah, it was a very exciting finish. We also saw Paddy McCartan pulling on the red sash and kicking 3 for Essendon. They had a real mixed bag of players playing with them. A very exciting game, and Southport franked themselves at the top of the ladder again.
And GWS got up over the Lions 86-59.
Didn't watch that game, but that's a strong result for GWS. Puts them back in the mix. I think that puts them into 6th or 7th position on the ladder against a Brisbane Lions team that's been struggling for personnel for a number of weeks now and haven't had a win for a while.
Interesting to note, though, with GWS, they've got a couple of games on a lot of the teams around them, so they're going to need to keep winning at every opportunity to consolidate that spot in the top 8. Cast our minds to the Victorian teams. What would they have been doing over the last few weeks? It'll obviously be a really difficult hit out for Frankston. Last time, coming off a lockdown, they played against the Northern Bull Ants, another standalone club. This time it's a different test coming up against Richmond, because they obviously would have had training.
They would have had a bit
AFL
of continuity.
Program.
Yeah. So I think it's a real challenge for all the standalone teams coming into this round of VFL football. The Frankston players have had fitness programs to complete over the lockdown period. Frankston have some really talented professionals in the fitness and high performance space. Very impressive. So they've had a good program for the players to follow. But the challenge amongst that is there hasn't been group training sessions. So with the lockdown finishing on Tuesday at midnight this week, Frankston will have trained Wednesday, I think it is. They'll get another Friday session in. So 2 training sessions leading into a game, whereas a number of the Richmond AFL players have been in the bubble with the senior team, would have had plenty of footy over that journey. So it's another layer of complexity to the season this year for the standalone sides. But at the end of the day, you've got to turn up ready to play. And for Frankston, it's Sunday at 2:05pm kickoff at the home fortress, which is Skybus Stadium.
I suppose the positive of playing Sunday afternoon, although Frankston haven't played a day game at home yet this season, is that they do get those 2 training sessions, so it does give them a little bit extra.
And I think the forecast for the weekend, no crowd allowed at the game unless you have one of the tickets to the President functions inside, but I think it's fairly inclement weather forecast for Sunday, so the game will probably play similar to a Friday night game, which Frankston have been so good at.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we do get into a bit more of an analysis of the Frankston versus Richmond game, that's the last match of the round, so we'll quickly run through the other VFL fixtures for this round. That kicks off with Gold Coast over Southport. I know you love giving your tips for these sorts of games, so you would expect Southport to continue their dominant run, would you?
Yeah, and I don't know if you can count last week as a full round, but I think that's 4 rounds in a row, Jonty, where I've tipped the card. So Southport will get up over Gold Coast. It'll be a bit closer than some of the games Southport have had up until last week, but they'll still maintain their position at the top of the ladder.
Sandy against Carlton.
Sandy will win that game. Carlton have tapered off a little bit, and Jake Batchelor going very well as a coach at Sandy, and they may still press press into finals calculations.
Get your weekly mention of Jake Batchelor in there. Collingwood play against Box Hill. Expect Collingwood, who were going really nicely before the bye, to expect them to get up.
Yeah, Craig Black doing an incredible job with the Collingwood team. Saw Sam Ratfowler got a little bit of coverage through the leader newspapers during the week. So Sam being a Dramana boy, and I saw Craig Black say that he's playing at the level and maybe could even play AFL in future. So we love seeing the Rat go well, but Collingwood should get over the line against Box Hill, although Box Hill have got a pretty strong lineup at the moment.
Port Melbourne would want to show some fight against an improving North Melbourne side, as we talk about coming off a 15-16 goal loss.
Yeah, there's been some conjecture during the week around the future of Gary Ayres as the Port Melbourne coach. I think there was a little bit of coverage. Gary Ayres wants to coach Port Melbourne next year. It seems to be an annual occurrence, but in this case, Port uncharacteristically going poorly at the moment. It's unusual for them. North should bank another win.
Aspley against Essendon. That'll be an interesting game.
I haven't seen a lot about how Essendon... who's going to play for them this week, given that there's a full list of teams playing. So I doubt they'd have access to the Swans players like they had during the week. So I think this might be an opportunity for Aspley to get their second win on the board at Graham Road Oval.
The most interesting game of the round. Casey are playing Footscray. Expect Footscray to get up, do you?
No, I'm going to go for Casey in this game. The two of the best teams in the competition. Footscray have tapered off a little bit in the last couple of games. I think they only knocked over North Melbourne by a little bit. Great to see son of former Frankston Dolphin and Chelsea legend Brett Bowie. So Jake Bowie will make his senior debut for the Melbourne AFL team this week. He's been going really nicely for Casey, and I think Casey will get up at home.
A quick tip, Brisbane against Sydney.
Sydney to win that one.
Northern Bullants against Werribee.
Werribee, a must-win for them. Northern Bullants flying with 3 in a row.
3 in a row, but Werribee need to win if they want to keep their finals hopes alive. And Coburg are playing Williamstown.
I think Williamstown will win that game.
And we get on to Frankston against Richmond. This will be a really interesting game like we talk about. It'll play like a wet weather game, similar to the Friday nights that we're used to, but Richmond have got some real star power up forward. It looks like Callum Coleman-Jones will play AFL, so that helps Frankston's defence, but they've still got Samson Ryan up there and Morris Rioli, who will apply a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting at the time of recording this show, Jonty. It's still an interchange for the Richmond AFL side. If Callum Coleman-Jones, if I can get that name right, if he plays VFL, he looms largely over this game as a potential match winner. So that'll be a really interesting one. Frankston traditionally aren't well equipped to handle the big key forwards, and if they had Samson Ryan and Callum Coleman-Jones roaming the forward 50, that'd be a hard matchup. Lockie Street, the Frankston YCW base player, has been really playing well for Richmond this year in the VFL and has been playing as an undersized ruckman that allows those two talls to do their work inside forward 50. So team selection will have a big impact on this game and who's playing at AFL level for Richmond. It's hard to get a read on Frankston's selection given the gap between the last game, and I would expect that the last training session will actually tell a couple of stories about players who either have or haven't done the work that they should have been doing over the break. That's always a challenge, but Frankston should go into this game full of confidence and with a number of their big gun players in good form and players we've really enjoyed watching. Mitch Cox's progress this year, and he's become a Skybus specialist. And a few other players for Frankston, like Josh Newman's just been a pillar of strength and the like. Before
we move on to analysing Frankston a bit more, some other players from Richmond who might pose a threat. I know Noah Cumberland against Collingwood, watched his game. He absolutely tore it apart for 10 to 15 minutes up forward for Richmond, so he looms large as another threat inside 50. And Biggie Nguyen is the Dandenong Stingray that's been on Richmond's list for a couple of years, a 194cm sort of hybrid utility. He's a fun one to watch as well, and he's progressing nicely in his career. But for all Richmond's, traditionally their VFL side's always been very strong, and it's given them a good base for players like Jake Arts and the like to do their apprenticeship and then push up into the senior side. Morris Rioli Jr. is a player that's worth watching. It's his pressure that he brings. It's his pressure. Not so much what he does with the ball, what he does without the ball. He's tackling, corralling. At the moment, he's sort of an 8 to 10 possession player a week. 8 to 10 possession per week player, but he's leading the way with his tackling. But he's got some elite crumbing skills,
And every game you see some offensive stuff, some glimpses that just are really, really impressive. He took 5 bounces and kicked a goal, but it's his tackling pressure is amazing. So there's plenty of interest for Richmond fans in their VFL side.
Derek Ekmalisi Smith and Paddy Nash, another couple of really solid VFL performers. Perhaps haven't got the opportunities they would have liked at AFL, but they're always really solid.
And Ben Miller's one down back, who I think's got quite a future as a key back. He's a potential chance to play AFL footy, whether it be this week or into future weeks as well. But Richmond have got some reasonable balance, I think, in their VFL side, and they're going to post certainly a tougher proposition and a tougher opposition than Port Melbourne a few weeks ago. So Frankston won't be able to go into this game with any thoughts of an easy win.
Yeah, you look at them on the ladder, and Richmond do sit quite a bit lower on the ladder than Frankston. But if you look at the games they've played, they've drawn with Williamstown, they've lost to Casey, lost to Werribee, so they haven't...
Close loss to Collingwood.
I suppose the disappointing loss was the one to the Northern Bull Ants, but outside of that, they haven't had a lot of easy games. Also lost to the Sandy Zebras.
Yeah,
that right?
Yeah, that's right. So if you looked at the relative draws of the two sides, Frankston have had a relatively soft or easier draw than Richmond, and that's probably reflected in the win and loss ratio, and why Frankston sit a bit higher. But having said that, and we'll look at some of the potential selections and some tactical issues, the big thing for me about this Sunday's game at Skybus is it's a game that will actually shape Frankston's finals chances. The VFL season's going to be a 13 or 12 game season, depending on how we go with this current lockdown. So for Frankston, there could be as little as 2 or 3 games left, and positioned in the 8 at 6 and 4, having played 2 more games than teams like Werribee and Sandringham. This is probably a must-win game for Frankston, and if they do win, it puts them in a really strong position to play finals footy in 2021, which I don't think...
Could you imagine saying that at the start of 2021?
Yeah, you would have been sort of laughed out of the VFL if you brought that up as a proposition at the start of the year. But I think it's shows the progress of Frankston, that they're now having to deal with those sort of different challenges of significant consequence being on the end of the line for this game.
And you bring up those difficult challenges in terms of having to, I suppose, retain the hunger. It's something we spoke to Josh Newman about before this current lockdown period. He plays his 100th game on the weekend, so all the very best to him and congratulations on a great start to his career. Unfortunately, we don't have him in today, but we spoke to him before the lockdown. Just a word on his journey to 100 games. Obviously started at Frankston, went to Williamstown for a year, and I know we penned a story together about his journey, then took a year off, went surfing, and has come back, and he's been a real bona fide leader about the place.
And if anyone hasn't seen that story, it's worth going to the Frankston Football Club Facebook page, and not just because we wrote it, Jonty, but that's a little...
Self-promoting.
A little part of it, but what the story does give you is an insight into his family, some friends, his partner...
Sarah,
teammates, his teammates, and the consistent theme that comes through is probably less about his football, but what he is as a person, and the caring nature and the time that he invests in people. He's an outstanding individual, and he, along with a number of other players, have built a really strong culture amongst the playing and coaching group in the last 2 to 3 years. And that's really showing out in the performance on the field. And I know he's a humble man, but he's very proud of the Dolphins jumper. And so it was a false start for his 100th game, scheduled 3 weeks ago. But hopefully people can tune in and get an appreciation for his ongoing performances as just a standout leader and captain of the Frankston Footy Club. And there'll be plenty more opportunities to enjoy his leadership and performance in years to come.
And he's been excellent for Frankston throughout the season, probably top 3 in their BNF so far, and they had a lot of contributors against Port Melbourne. I know we were talking about after the game, there's probably 10 to 15 players that the coaches could have named in their best 3 or 4 on the ground. Who are you most looking forward to watching? I know you've talked about Mitch Cox, unfortunately we won't have the crowd to celebrate too, and likewise Josh Begley. Yeah. Who are you looking forward to watching for Frankston this weekend?
Well, the thing I'm looking forward to most is to see if they continue with their style of footy that we've sort of spoken about being their DNA, the small forwards, the pressure that they can put on inside 50, sort of the chaos that they can create. Probably Frankston have gone to a single tall target up forward. And when they're playing their best footy, the small forwards like Jack Mentha, probably their medium-sized forwards as well, and Josh Begley and Bailey Lambert. But the real standout characteristic has been the pressure they're putting on the opposition. And what that's doing is, particularly against Port Melbourne we saw, but across a number of games this year, it means when the ball's coming out of their back line, it's coming out sort of dirty or not clean, and it gives them an opportunity to set up behind the ball and then get repeat forward entries. Frankston's midfield's been very solid this year. We've seen James Rendell come into some really strong form in the second half, and he and Jack Berry have been sharing the ruck duties. And when you're putting players like Josh Newman, Connor Riley and Mitch Cox have spent midfield time, you can't not mention Nathan Freeman, who's leading the possession averages across the VFL competition, averaging 38 possessions a week. He just gets the job done every week. So Frankston will be looking to press home an advantage through the midfield and up forward. Their defence is always probably battling against the odds a little bit. They're undersized. Saw Tyler Young go back as a tall forward last week. Tall defender, sorry.
Well, we talked about Richmond's potence up forward. What can Frankston do to counter that? I think back to the Footscray game, and Billy McCormack, who was a debutant at the time, was playing on Josh Shackey. So who are you sending to the big men down there? Potentially Coleman Jones and certainly Samson Ryan.
I think Tyler Young would be a good matchup for Samson Ryan. He's still in the embryonic stages of his career, Jonty, so he's not physically a beast yet that he'll probably be in 2 or 3 years. So I think that could be a great matchup. And a Billy McCormack could be a Callum Coleman-Jones matchup. But you've always got the option of Max Williams, who's a strong body, probably undersized. And then you've got players such as Liam Hiscock and Will Arthurson, who's been excellent, helping out as an extra defender.
Would you send Tom Small to Maurice Rioli?
I'd send someone to it. We'll wait and see what happens at selection this week. But there's plenty of intrigue right across the ground. For our viewers at home, the game's going to be covered on 98.7 or 98.3 FM with the RPPFM call team, and also be live streamed. So if you go to the Frankston website, you can pick up those links. But if nothing else, tune into the best call team in the VFL, Jonty. You'll be upgraded this week, I think, to number 1 in the commentary box. So that's something for our fans to look forward to.
Led by ourselves and Ollie Walker-Peel. Really looking forward to it. In 10 words or less, Frankston win or Frankston lose?
Frankston in the tightest of tight games to ram home their finals chances.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Peninsula VFL Update. Unfortunately, you won't be able to watch the boys at Skybus Stadium, but like Mick said, tune in to 98.7 RPPFM, your Peninsula footy, to watch Frankston versus Richmond, 2:05 PM, Sunday.
Go Dolphins!
Forgot to mention women's.